everyone thinks, and this is probably the wrong phrase to use, but everyone thinks there's a magic bullet. You know, they've all got this idea that there's this one thing we need to fix, and it's a different thing depending on who you talk to.
Basically, just shit happens. Like, there are these odd things where it's completely unpredictable. There's absolutely no reason. It's just somebody had some crossed wires and they did something completely awful.
It's not that people have the wrong idea. It's that they don't have the complete idea. They've all picked this one thing that they think is the golden rule for why these terrible things occur. And they want to focus everything on that. And then they start fighting with other people that think they've got the fix, and nothing gets done every single time.
You could ban guns across the board, and yeah, it might reduce the casual violence, like people on the street shooting each other or whatever, you know, that might go down a little bit. But these kinds of incidents, mass murders, will not change.
But it's like, you call that racist, you call that bigoted, and then you turn around and do the exact same thing and take a righteous stance. Like, that's not helping anybody.
The thing about this that I think is the most troubling, I think, is, I mean, well, apart from the fact that two people thought that they could solve the issues they saw in the world by just killing a bunch of people. That's the worst part about it. But the second worst part about it is the way people interpret it, the way the media interprets it. They jumped on it like it was an opportunity to further some kind of agenda and spun it totally.
You have sensationalism, you have bias. Where do you get information?
Well, that's
Did
a
you
good
think
question.
microscopy?
Okay, everybody, welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt.
And I'm Casey Rochford, and go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, because that's what awesome people do. And stick around to the end of the show, because we've got a new song every week.
Oh yeah.
So what do you want to discuss today?
Wow, we've got kind of a big subject here. And at the time of this recording, during this, last weekend, there were two shootings, basically back to back, two mass shootings. And it
was like the same day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Like within 24 hours.
Yeah. And I mean, it's all over the news now, and people are speculating, and there's so much stuff going around. It's kind of difficult to make any kind of sense of it. And I thought maybe we could talk about that, and maybe just mass shootings in general be an interesting one.
Because like just days prior to that, there was the Gilroy Garlic Festival in California or something, where a guy went and shot a bunch of people up, and there's so much misinformation like flying around, because I don't really know what to make of that one, because there's a lot of people on one side saying this was a white supremacy thing, and then you hear from the other side, it's like, well, this guy was half Iranian first off, so it's like, start splitting hairs there, like, but he also was spouting some anti-white rhetoric or something, and I don't know, like, it's and all I'm over here doing is being like, who cares what nationality he is or who he hates? He's an asshole, and like this is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think there's a lot of focus on that, that, but it kind of ignores the reasons, and yeah, you're right. I mean,
Well,
it's
everyone thinks, and this is probably the wrong phrase to use, but everyone thinks there's a magic bullet. You know, they've all got this idea that there's this one thing we need to fix, and it's a different thing depending on who you talk to. You know, they're
yeah.
like, there's of course the camp that's like, we need gun control because this guy legally bought this gun and didn't have any priors with the police or any mental issues, but he shouldn't have been able to get this gun.
Hmm.
And then you've got people that are like, it's because he's a white guy.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of like white supremacists.
And yeah, and then there's people saying, well, it's because he's mentally ill. And it's like, well, obviously he's mentally ill. Like normal people don't go and kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But then there's people saying, don't call it mental illness. This is the craziest shit I've heard in a long time. Don't call it mental illness because that's insulting to other people with mental illnesses that don't kill people. It's like, well,
Oh,
not all mental illnesses are equal, and I think we all understand that.
yeah, that's true.
And I even saw an article that said it wasn't mental illness. He's clearly a sociopath. And I was like, let me double check the DSM. Yep. Yep, that's a mental illness. So
Yeah. Oh man, and I at this point there's just so much going around. It's difficult to even figure out the facts behind this. The Garlic Festival shooter is one thing. I haven't actually looked too much into that, but I did hear about it. But now, like the guy in Texas and the guy in Ohio and stuff, and now they're blaming another thing that people blame now. Apparently, this is back in vogue again: violent video games.
right, yeah.
You know.
That's its own episode for sure. Um, that and like music and stuff, that like Columbine, they were blaming Marilyn Manson or something. And,
Yeah.
back in the 80s, like suicides were being blamed on Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne and
Yeah, exactly.
Twisted Sisters, we're not going to take it video that was like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon.
Yeah. and that's the thing. I think it's important to stress that these things are a lot more nuanced than the media generally portrays them as. I think there's this kind of drive to whittle things down to like one major thing, and I don't think there is one major thing. I think that just people go crazy sometimes.
Yeah, and nowadays misinformation spreads so fast. Like a short time ago, like today, hours ago, I guess. um, there was a supposedly a shooting at another Walmart in Louisiana, and then like I don't know, 30 minutes ago or something, it came out like, oops, no, there wasn't actually a shooting. Like, how do you screw that up?
That's
But then I'm reading through the article, and it's like, originally it was reported that there was an active shooter and there were multiple gunshots fired and people wounded and stuff. And then it said there actually wasn't an active shooting. There was just people who drew guns at each other. But then it said somebody went to the hospital with gunshot wounds. It's like, which is it? Did somebody shoot or did somebody not shoot? Like, what?
Yeah. How do you not shoot and merely draw guns, but then somebody has gunshot wounds and they go to a hospital? That doesn't make. This is the thing. Maybe
Somebody turn over 2 pages at once.
yeah, exactly. Maybe I think we need to be pushing more for the media to maybe report the facts before drawing conclusions about things, and we draw the conclusions after exhaustive research.
Yeah, they're now in competition with the speed of information, and
Yeah.
they're trying to get the story out before all the facts are in because they want to be the first to report it, because now Joe Blow can put it on his Facebook page, and then exponential growth happens and it goes viral, and people get their information from Facebook and Twitter, and and they're not watching the news anymore. So I think there's definitely this lack of quality in the media that comes as a result of that.
Yeah, and it seems that there's so much drive to get this information out there before anything is known. And it's what's sad about it is it's not just reporting the facts like, oh, okay, this one guy did this thing and a bunch of people are dead and injured and stuff. No, it's spin.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just reporting the details of what happened. There's a whole bunch of opinion thrown into it. And it's really disturbing to me because I feel like there's kind of this drive. I don't know, like almost like there's an intent to create some kind of narrative or
Yeah,
reinforce it.
I don't know if that's a new thing though.
No, it's not.
Yeah, because I mean, like, yeah, you've got, like, I've heard one of these shooters, I can't keep them all straight, I don't remember which one it was, but one of these shooters, I saw some article about how he came from such a prominent family. It's like, who gives a crap? like
Mm-hmm.
like and you know, back in the 80s they were, you know, interviewing Ted Bundy's mom and stuff like that. It's the same sensationalism.
Yeah,
You know, it's like
yeah, it is.
people are, you know, into the dirty laundry stuff. They want to see the origin story of the evil villain and stuff like that. And
I don't think that's entirely bad, like, because we are fascinated with things like that, and
yeah.
rightfully so. And it's important to know why things happen. I mean, I believe that there are situations where things basically just shit happens. Like there are these odd things where it's completely unpredictable. There's absolutely no reason. It's just somebody
Mm-hmm.
had some crossed wires and they did something completely awful.
Yeah.
Um, but there's certainly reasons for everything. I think there's a cause, but so I think it's important to understand why things happen, especially something heinous like that, because I think people have an interest in preventing it from happening again. I don't know
Yeah.
that the proposed ideas could possibly do that.
Well, no, because like I mentioned earlier, you can't just fix one thing
Yeah.
and expect it all to change. Um, you know, like access to guns might be an issue in some of these cases. Yeah, certainly not all of them. Certainly not even most of them.
Yeah.
And greater access to mental health would across the board be a great thing.
Oh, I
Just, you
agree.
know,
Yeah.
in general, and not only to, you know, prevent tragedies like this, but that's fallible too, because that's still dependent on that particular person going and seeking help.
Yeah, which
But
probably I think destigmatizing mental health problems would be a good first step, so people
yeah,
don't feel bad, like so society doesn't berate them for having some issue. Because honestly, we let let's be honest here, we all have mental health issues,
yeah.
everybody.
And I
So
mean, it's not that people have the wrong idea, it's that they don't have the complete idea.
mhm.
They've all picked this one thing that they think is the golden rule for why these terrible things occur, and they want to focus everything on that, and then they start fighting with other people that think they've got the fix, and nothing gets done every single time.
It
Every
sounds
single time. It's predictable.
it kind of sounds like religions battling it out over whose doctrine is the most uh you know the most correct.
Yeah.
And in the end, like nothing is accomplished and no one's actually right.
And people are so resistive to hearing criticism that, you know, maybe what they're going on about isn't actually helping anything.
Yeah, yeah, because at the end of the day, we just want to make things better for people.
Yeah,
And
but that makes you a racist
yeah,
somehow.
yeah, sadly,
Yeah. Oh, the logical fallacies are abound with when things
uh,
like this happen.
Yeah, and I don't know that social media is really helping things either, because what happens is, like you're saying, that the news post gets reposted over and over and over again, and people just run with it, and regardless of the origins of that story, or that opinion piece, it turns into its own thing, independent of where it came from. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's helping anybody.
No, and I think the expectations are set really high too. Um, no matter what, like if we had a utopian society, there is hopefully no way that you can control individuals to the point where you're ever going to prevent all of these kinds of tragedies from happening.
Well, you
Like it's there's so many facets, so many variables that lead to something like this happening. It's not just one thing. It's not just a couple things. It's an entire person's life up to that point led them down that path. You could point to any one thing and say that caused it. Well, yeah, you might be right, but it's one piece of the pie. That's a small piece of the pie.
yeah, the whole thing is cumulative,
Mhm.
in that the end result is the product of all of those events that led up to the end.
Yeah.
And
How are you going to fix abusive parenting, bullying, access to guns, access to mental health? How are you going to fix the way people think about other races?
yeah,
Like that's a really hard thing to do. Not
yeah,
saying we shouldn't do it, but it's hard, and it's
yeah,
not
it
going to
is.
happen overnight.
And you can't legislate those things. You can
Right.
try, but I think history has proven that it's impossible, that in fact it actually has a counterproductive effect in a lot of those situations, like
Yeah. And like,
prohibition.
yeah, or we start creeping into dystopian fiction like thought crimes or whatever from
Yeah, a brave new world, that kind of
yeah,
thing. Like, I don't know that that's the right way to go. And I think, yes, we should certainly be doing things to try to improve things, but at the same time, we have to be cautious about our methods, and not jump too quickly into them,
yeah,
without really pondering the implications of those processes, because I think it could definitely go the wrong way very, very quickly if we
yeah,
react instead of thoughtfully respond to things.
yeah, yeah. Like it's getting to be complete mayhem. Uh, like up until a day or two ago, I could honestly say I've never heard or seen someone actually make the argument that we should completely ban all guns. But then I saw someone say it. They were like, I think only the police should have guns and all the rest of them should be done away with. And I was like, are you serious? You want to leave the biggest organized crime syndicate armed and take it away from everyone else?
That's a good point. And here's the thing. I can talk a little bit about that. So yeah, you could ban guns. Let's say we, at the federal level, banned all guns. So it's all, everything's banned. Um, well, I mean, if the person advocating for this strategy is thinking they're going to stop mass shootings, which constitute a very small proportion of murders, by the way, it's actually not that many, even though the media will try to paint it in a different light. Um, it it's not, such an action would not have the desired result. You could ban guns across the board, and yeah, it might reduce the casual violence, like people on the street shooting each other or whatever. That might go down a little bit. But these kinds of incidents, mass murders, will not change. Guns are still around. I mean, prohibition doesn't work, so we know
Or
that.
other methods like the
Yeah,
the Boston bomber or whatever.
yeah,
Like there's if you take away one method, there's still others available.
sure. And
Um,
and let's look at an actual, uh, real world example of that, Australia. So Australia did institute a gun ban after the Port Arthur massacre, I think it was. Um, I could be wrong about that. It is too hot up here. I'm like sweating. So if I can't recall things accurately,
Was that pretty recent?
no, that was a while ago. It was like a decade ago or something like that. But so there was this mass shooting that happened, and they banned guns in Australia. And basically, if you look at so people say, well, before the ban, there were this many mass shootings and murders and stuff, and it was really high, and then after it was really low. But they're only looking at it from a kind of a binary perspective. And if you look at it from in a sense of a graph over time, violent crime had been decreasing consistently. And if you plot the point where the ban occurred into that graph, there's essentially no change. And in fact, I think it was University of Australia or something, like they're actually pretty good at tracking information. It's a really, really good resource on gun violence. If I remember, we can post this link. The thing is, now the amount of guns in Australia is pretty much at pre-ban levels. So the ban really didn't keep guns away from that country. They're still there. And so if you think about it, if somebody's intent on murdering a whole bunch of people, they will still have access. It may be more difficult, but if you think about it, if somebody's been planning something for a month or whatever, they're going to figure out a way, and they're going to get the tools they need. And if they can't, they're going to find another way. I mean, Timothy McVeigh is a good example. A fertilizer bomb blew up half of a building. Like, he didn't need any guns. So I don't know that the solution is to look at the tool that somebody used and try to restrict anybody's access to it, thinking that that's going to fix the problem. Because the problem is, obviously somebody went haywire. Like, there is a problem there. That's what we should be analyzing. Like, what is it that makes somebody do something completely atrocious like that?
So I don't know. I guess as a devil's advocate, I would say, in the light of the idea that changing just one thing isn't a good idea, but maybe we should change a lot of things, right? The Australia example, while it may be following the trend, the downward trend that was already occurring, it also hasn't gone up since the ban. So it's not really harmed anything, has it?
Well, that's a big philosophical thing, because it can be argued that it may have harmed something in terms of people's ability to defend themselves, or maybe
But
rise up.
Wouldn't that reflect in the graph if it were anything statistically significant?
Well, not necessarily, because as we've discussed before in actually our very first episode, I think that most defensive gun uses don't result in somebody being shot, and there could be millions of them happening every year, at least in the U.S.
But this trend was violent crime, not shootings, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but the point is, there could be beneficial aspects to people owning firearms that, if you strip that away from people, then it could actually create more harmful, a more harmful product. And if you think about the fact that there's more guns than people in the U.S., do you think that a gun ban is actually going to eliminate them? I think it's going to roll into that age-old saying that if you ban guns, that the only people with guns will be criminals and well, police, and well,
same thing.
Yeah. So it's a difficult distinction to make sometimes.
Well, we could refer people to our first episode on gun control, and I do also want to touch on the statistic that you mentioned earlier, that mass shootings represent a relatively, actually a very small proportion of murders, and that is very true. In the last 4 years, though there have been like a lot of mass shootings, like more than a handful,
Yeah.
close to 20 notable ones that I saw in this one particular article. I tallied it up, and it was like less than 300 people in those 4 years. But I don't think that matters per se. Like I think it's still a bad thing that we should definitely be trying to find a solution for. It
I
doesn't,
totally agree.
it's not like I don't want to grease the squeakiest wheel and forget about these 300 people that died.
No, not at all, not at all. And I mean,
Yeah.
I got a lot of thoughts on that. I just, I'm concerned when the solution is basically just some kind of knee-jerk legislation to ban the tool employed. I mean, if there's an epidemic of car accidents killing people, do we ban cars, or do we attempt to discern, like figure out why it is that people are dying in car accidents? Maybe it's just the fact that we need seatbelts or airbags or something. I don't know, but the solution, it's so easy for people to just fall into that kind of cycle of, oh well, someone used this thing, so let's ban it. And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. There's a deeper problem going on. And so yeah, you could ban guns and stop somebody from potentially getting a gun, but they're still intent on murdering a bunch of people, and they probably will, because as we know, somebody intent, if they're willing to kill in that way, they're going to find a way. So in that regard, win the battle, lose the war, basically.
Yeah. Your car analogy is a good one. Like banning cars to prevent car accidents. It's like, well, yeah, there might be an impact in a positive way, but what else are we sacrificing for it? And I think it's a logical oversight that people have. Like they can't apply this analogical thinking, where they look at another situation that's somewhat similar and maybe is a little more cut and dry, that could kind of show them the correct way of thinking about something. And I want to segue this into the other thing that people are pointing at is a racial divide. It's like, yeah, there is, without a doubt. I mean, people are writing manifestos and stuff, and the El Paso shooter went as close to the border as he could so he could specifically target Latinos. And
yeah, and I want to talk about that at some point, by the way. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and so while there is definitely a majority of mass shooters that are like white dudes, it basically getting pissed off at all white dudes because these small amount of people that go and kill a bunch of people happen to be white dudes is bigotry. And there's really no two ways to look at it, because the people that are saying this are the exact same people that, rightly so, call out Donald Trump for saying all Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers. Blanket statement about Mexicans because a few are cartel runners or murderers or whatever that come across the border. But it's like, you call that racist, you call that bigoted, and then you turn around and do the exact same thing and take a righteous stance. Like, that's not helping anybody.
No, you're right. You're totally right. I mean, because what proportion of white people are mass shooters? It's such a tiny proportion of the. I mean, let's say in the U.S.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so why would you say that? Why would anybody have that presumption that because there's a couple of people who believe this thing and carried out heinous acts, that represents somehow everybody else? Like I have no connection whatsoever to those people. So don't lump me into that category.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
hell
No,
no.
it's like just be, yeah. I don't want to get too far off into that one because that's probably its own episode. But
Yeah, probably.
basically, what I'm trying to say is like, if you take an arbitrary descriptor and use it to base something off of the color of someone's skin, like if you were to say, well, look at the proportion of black people in prison, they must all be bad people. Like that's fucked up. Sorry,
No, it's a logically fallacious kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's other reasons for people being in prison. You could say that maybe there's some kind of cultural thing or something like that, or maybe people just it could be the whole inner city effect or whatever. But there
It's
could be
always more
racism
than one
too.
thing. Yeah, it's always more than one thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole slew of things at work, and to point out only one thing does that tragedy a disservice. I think, like, we're shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of coming up with an actual solution if we ignore the totality of all causes in favor of one thing that strikes an emotional chord in us.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with this sort of situation. I see what I see, and I looked into the El Paso shooter a little bit, and the guy in Ohio, um, and what I see is a lot of misinformation. There's basically they're cherry picking out of his manifesto, which, by the way, I did read it, and I recommend everybody should if you can find it, because most of the time it's basically people talking about it and not actually giving it for people to read and judge for themselves.
Well,
Uh,
maybe you should talk a little bit about it then, because
yeah. So the thing is, basically, what I saw in the media angle of it, broadly, is that they cherry picked statements out of it and then drew conclusions off of it. Most of it was basically racism. Oh, and Trump,
yeah,
making these connections that are not really, if you read the entire thing, it's pretty impossible to make those connections because, in fact, in the manifesto, he specifically states that Trump has nothing to do with his decision. So I don't know how you can make that connection. Then they're saying like something about,
oh, you mentioned Trump.
yeah, exactly. What's the whole thing? It's like, look, people, things are more nuanced than we're led to believe, and we should be critical and use a little bit of reason and think for ourselves. And that's where the media, I think, is very harmful because it sounds like what they're trying to do is create this divide and
Hmm.
spin things to I whip up a frenzy or something like that, and people are just rolling with it. It's all over the place. And
What was your overall impression of the manifesto, though? Like,
I
do you think it's accurate to say that there was racism involved in this?
well, he in the manifesto, he did mention that and kind of dismissed that idea, that it wasn't necessarily racism. It's just people coming into this country opportunistically to take advantage of the system, and it pissed him off. And this is the thing, people are like, well, he was like a Republican or something. No, he called out Republicans and Democrats both. He talks about the environment and how the environment needs to be saved. He talked about UBI, the universal basic income, and how corporations are bad, big corporations and stuff. And it's like, you can't pigeonhole somebody the way that they are.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the whole text of that hasn't been given to people, because it paints a more colorful picture of an individual with some interesting thoughts. I thought he
Well,
made some good points. I thought that a lot of it was a little bit crazy. I think he's definitely, I don't know, in some other world, but
mhm.
it's definitely not that which we're led to believe by, if you watch mainstream media or read those things. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's really like what you just said. People would jump all over you and say you're a racist apologetic or something, because they've got this logical fallacy that, you know, like one bad deed, completely bad person, you know, and like there's no doubt in my mind that this is a really bad person because of what he did. Like there's certainly a line that was crossed.
Sure.
But it, yeah, like it doesn't mean, you know, you can't say, well, if he told me the sky was blue, I wouldn't believe him because he did this thing. You know, that.
Yeah, exactly. He pointed out some interesting things, like
Yeah. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that, yeah, he had some interesting points and maybe he was right about some of them, but you know, the take home message is that none of it justifies what he did.
exactly. Yeah.
Like that's important to like hear that one.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody hear that. Like nothing that we just said was meant to justify what he did.
No, and I
Like,
don't think,
and it's sad that we have to say that really loud and over again. But
yeah, I don't think any of what he did could be justified based on what he said. I think he brought up some valid points about issues that should be corrected or addressed or thought about or discussed. But his solution was murder, killing a bunch of people, and that's not the way to solve those sorts of things.
No, I'd argue that all the ways we're going about it are not the right way. Like incarcerating people for a misdemeanor in shitty conditions or killing them, like two very, very bad things. Let's not do those anymore, please.
Yeah. And I mean, I was just reading an article today that this is a little bit of an aside, so forgive me for that. It's hot. So I was reading an article about a cop going to a house and aiming to shoot a dog that wasn't being aggressive, and then he killed a woman instead of the dog. And there's body cam footage of that. It's like, what the hell's going on there? That could be its own thing. I mean, we've already talked about that a little bit. But
we could have a whole channel on police, I swear.
yeah. Oh, Jesus. The thing about this that I think is the most troubling, I think, is, I mean, well, apart from the fact that two people thought that they could solve the issues they saw in the world by just killing a bunch of people. That's the worst part about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the second worst part about it is the way people interpret it, the way the media interprets it. They jumped on it like it was an opportunity to further some kind of agenda and spun it totally. They filtered out all of the stuff that would give somebody a reasonable, rational picture of what happened and turned it into something to further their agenda. And, you know, they turned it, basically, they just took this situation where there was a disturbed person who had some thoughts about things and things that bothered them, and they turned it into something that's like, oh, well, you know, Trump is the problem and it's racism, and watered it down. And that isn't really what it is, especially the Ohio shooter. He had nothing to do with it, but then he got lumped into it too. And everybody's rolling with it. It's all over social media. And it's like, what does nobody do their own research anymore? Do you not see something sensational and think, hey, maybe I should dig a little deeper and research this and find out if they're actually telling the truth?
What's hard, you know, like so you've got mainstream media whose prime goal is ratings. So of course they're sensationalizing everything.
Yeah.
And then social media gets their news from sensationalized media.
Mm-hmm.
And social media's goal is to cherry pick the data that makes them feel like their idea is right. So you get like super divisive opinions flying around at the speed of information. And and it's just a nightmare. Like you have sensationalism, you have bias. Where do you get information?
Well, that's
Could
a
you
good
think
question.
microscopy?
Yeah, I would hope so. It would come from us. We're pretty rational. Well, the thing is, through all of that, do you know what lies on the chopping block after all of this hype and media hubbub and stuff goes on? What is dead? the truth. People don't care about the truth anymore. They care about, I don't know, getting likes on Facebook or something like that. I don't know. I don't understand it. But you can't even have a civil discussion with people over things without it turning into a flame war.
Yeah.
We've both experienced that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so sometimes, like, I haven't done this in a really long time, and I probably won't, just because I need to promote the show and stuff. But sometimes I have to decompress and take time off from Facebook because it's draining, like
Oh,
emotionally draining.
yeah,
And a
it
lot of
is.
people do. A lot of people take little breaks,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really healthy.
Yeah,
Because you get exposed to all this bullshit, and it just eats away at your own critical thinking skills.
yeah,
Like,
it does.
you surround yourself with enough tautological arguments, you start to think that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really harmful. I mean, social media has some benefits, but it's certainly twisted into something that it's a far cry from MySpace. I'll say this right now. I miss MySpace.
I do
A,
too.
a
Yeah.
bunch of music and sparkly GIFs flying around, and auto playing videos in your feed,
Hmm.
and anonymity. Like, I mean, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Facebook, yeah, and Twitter in particular has created a lot of divisiveness, and echo chambers. Basically, just a bunch of people reinforcing whatever they believe and never being challenged. And if they're challenged, they just shut people down. And
Oh
this
yeah.
that's occurring in this very situation. You
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. People need to be challenged. There was I'll see if I can find this study. It was behind a paywall, but I'm considering buying it. It's only like 12 or $15. It was a study that showed that people who have their opinions challenged actually become better at crafting arguments for their position and become better at critical thinking. So if they are thinking kind of the wrong way about something, they become more likely to change their mind if they're challenged.
hmm,
And we have this culture arising of people that say, no, 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 we can't talk to these people because that makes us part of the problem. We need to
oh,
we need to just be violent with them and shut them down and push them back in the shadows so that it can fester without us having to see it or think about it.
yeah, exactly. That's a matter of science. Like,
Mhm.
science challenges itself all the time.
Yeah.
That's part of the scientific method. You
Yeah. So that study doesn't surprise me at all. It's just good to have that, validation data there that says, hey, look, there is scientific validity to the claim that it's worthwhile to talk to people with kind of screwy ideas.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. This is something that I realized through my, I'm not going to say how many years, but if a couple decades of my lifespan, that it doesn't matter if you're right or not. What actually matters is the truth. And if you focus on, basically make the truth your goal, like uncovering the truth, arriving at the truth through your investigation, then being right doesn't matter anymore. And I think all too often people are so concerned about being right and convincing people of their views at the cost of the truth. And that is totally harmful. That's exactly why we're where we are right now.
Yeah,
And
and our understanding of what the truth is, especially in the realm of science, it's always subject to change.
yeah, it totally is.
Like, everything's changing, everything's dynamic.
Hmm.
Like, the world is in a constant state of creation and destruction, entropy, and like,
Yeah, flux.
yeah, basically, yeah, the ebb and flow, and that changes things. That erodes at the very structure. I'm getting super metaphysical here.
Yeah, we kind of like diverged a little bit from the origin of the conversation, but I think it's
Yeah.
actually valid. I think it's related.
No, I think this
In a
is
way.
very relevant, actually, because I think it speaks to the fact that there are so many facets to what goes into any major decision,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to dissect. But in the instance of mass shootings, there's absolutely not one thing you can point to and say that's why this happened.
No, and that's why I
Why
think
this always happens. Like you can't possibly do that. You're
exactly,
right.
and so many people speak as if they have some kind of authority on the matter, and really, no one knows. I think if you think you understand why these things happen, you're a fool. Like you really haven't dug into it because I'll be the first to admit I'm a total idiot, but I don't understand why these things happen, but I definitely know that it's not one cause.
Yeah.
And to say that, like you said earlier on, like that there's going to be a magic bullet that'll solve all of our woes and make this never happen again, we're deceiving ourselves, and we're actually making it worse
Yeah.
because we think we've solved it, and in fact we haven't.
Yeah. And it's like this is important to remember also, is like if you do have an idea that one thing caused these mass shootings, your idea might be right, but you can still be wrong, because the fact that it's not the only problem is a very important part of the puzzle. Like,
Yeah.
so while your point may be totally valid, you have to understand and you have to consider that there are other factors and that it's never black and white.
No, no. And I don't think these things stem from any one source either. I mean, if you look through history, through time, these events, there really isn't one cause for all of this.
Yeah, I mean, just in the last three major mass shootings, from Gilroy to Dayton, Ohio, I'm sure you've seen this picture. You could just as easily say, well, people with stupid glasses and mousy haircuts are going to start killing people because these guys look like triplets.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are some eerie similarities there.
Yeah, especially two of them, like the El Paso and Dayton, or no, Gilroy and El Paso
Yeah.
look like twins.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That is weird. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories flying around about that. Like, this is a
Are they the
manufactured
same
thing,
person?
false flags and stuff like that, which, here's the thing. I do want to say this. Um, the I wonder if some people who do these things are trying to incite an event, like some kind of conflict. The New Zealand shooter specifically mentioned that in the manifesto that he left behind, which was kind of swept under the rug, but he actually did that with the intent to create a race war, to basically create a civil war.
Hmm.
And is all of the response that's going on just feeding into that? Are they actually winning as a result of people getting all flustered and yelling at each other over this? I wonder. you
Yeah.
know and that's, again, it's like when these things happen, we have to stop and think and analyze it and be calm and rational. And yes, it's absolutely terrible, and mourning is a good thing, but we also shouldn't be lashing out at our neighbors. uh,
Yeah, like that's the biggest problem I have, is that everyone's so steadfast about being right that they are wasting efforts fighting with other people that are trying to fix things too, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they think that their way is the only way. And even if you show them the logic and explain it to them why they might be misguided, they follow that argument from inertia where they're like, well, I can't admit I'm wrong now. I just got to stick to my guns. You know, even if it's on a subconscious level, that's exactly what's happening. Like they're presented with a perfectly logical argument and they're still like, I'm sticking to my original thought. And we've all been guilty of that. I certainly have. But
Yeah, everybody is, but it's important to recognize that you're subject to the same rules that guide or that dictate all of our behavior, and
yeah,
you're not exempt from it. So yeah, no, that's a good point. And in these situations, people allow emotion to rule them, and logic falls by the wayside. And I think logic is actually the solution. Like, we have to be thoughtful in our approach to figuring these things out. And you know, maybe through scientific rigor, we're going to come to the conclusion that there is no way to stop it. Like, maybe tragic things just happen. Maybe not. I'd like to see them never happen,
I
but
mean,
it's
yeah,
possible.
I I think we could certainly do things to reduce it, but no, I don't think it's possible to eliminate. Um, just because you can't control people's minds when it boils down to it,
Oh,
and
In-Q-Tel
sometimes,
will have you believe otherwise, though.
yeah, we'll do a tinfoil hat episode one of these days.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, when you get right down to it, uh, there's always going to be a little miswiring in a few people that makes them think there's no other choice but for me to go do something horrible.
yeah. And what's interesting too,
That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to fix things.
no, we absolutely should. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, oh, man. Oh God, I could just go on and on about this. There's just so much.
Yeah.
I mean, even in just a couple days here, all this stuff.
Yeah,
Man,
it's definitely emotionally heavy. Like
yeah,
it really just drags on like your whole day. It's in the back of your mind, like the crazy shit that's happening. Like you're not really safe anywhere. It seems like now, and at any given moment, somebody might lash out and start killing people at random,
yeah,
or specifically, whatever it is, you might be in danger, and there definitely needs to be a move towards making that happen less. But
oh, I agree, and I don't think that legislation is actually the answer. I think that probably does more harm than good. I think it starts with us,
mhm.
everybody, the people taking the situation seriously. Like, if you see warning signs, maybe it's time to act, time to talk to somebody, time to be a friend or something. Whatever the situation is, um, don't ignore these kinds of things. Like, don't dismiss them because you just think, oh, it's a phase that somebody's going through. We should probably take it seriously, but I don't think that banning the tools that someone's used is going to change anything. This ex post facto kind of stuff, like, okay, they're just going to come up with a different way. So that's not the solution. And the solution that people have entertained at the high level, mental health stuff, I worry about that, because then that could turn into some kind of crazy witch hunt where it's like, you know, anybody with any kind of mental disorder suddenly has no rights or something like that, and you're always labeled as a potential terrorist because you got something, you're depressed or something like that. I think that's dangerous territory.
Yeah, I was so like I don't own a gun or anything. I've always intended to, but it's been on a back burner. And when I checked myself into a mental hospital for suicide attempt, I was a little worried that, oh, am I going to be denied firearms for this?
Well,
I still don't know the answer to that. And
you actually, you could, and that's kind of bogus because, in fact, if you look at the numbers, people that are have mental disorders are more likely to be the victim of crimes than to commit crimes. So shouldn't we be allowing them to have firearms? I don't know. But then I, man,
well, yeah, again, no two illnesses are alike, so
yeah.
it's really hard to it's hard to legislate something that's so poorly understood, really.
Well, yeah, you could have like 10,000 sociopaths and only one of them uh, kills a whole bunch of people.
Oh yeah,
You know,
sociopaths are all over the place, but most
yeah,
of them don't do anything.
yeah, exactly. But yet people say, oh, well, they were a sociopath or they were on some kind of psychoactive medication, and that was the reason. I I think the reasons are far more nuanced, and it's so easy to just point to something and say, well, that's the boogeyman. But I don't think that's the way it works. I think it is a more complex issue and that there is an answer out there somewhere, but it's going to take some work. And people don't like work. Um, and they don't want to be challenged.
Yeah,
And I think when people have some sort of conclusion they've drawn, they're unwilling to change their mindset about something. And what's the outcome? You ignore all of the factors and more people die because you want to feel good. It really bothers me.
yeah, yeah. It's sad that like when things like this kind of come to a head, and lots of these things are happening at the same time, and it really punctuates things. People get really heightened emotions. And I almost always lose a few friends when that happens, you know.
Yeah.
Just because, and it's ridiculous that that happens, you know, because we all actually want the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's wrong with asking questions and trying to think critically about it? Like, why would you lose friends over, man, I yeah,
Yeah,
if you're just pointing out the inconsistencies or something like that, or saying we should be logical about things and people want to fight, that's how bad things happen. So,
yeah,
you know, man, I have all kinds of thoughts on this. I mean, we could probably go on and on and on and on, but I do want to ask, like, because I wonder about this all the time. People flip out whenever there's 20, 30 people killed in some kind of mass shooting, but yet every year in Chicago, like in 2017, over 600 people died in Chicago and by homicide. In 2018, it was over 500. Where's the outrage there? Where's the call for action there? And it troubles me that those things are ignored, but yet these things are highlighted.
yeah.
Um, just a little food for thought, I guess.
Well, I think on some level, people understand that in like a one-on-one homicide situation, there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's emotion, there's like heat of the moment. A lot of those things aren't necessarily premeditated. If you
No,
really
no,
look.
no. You're right. A lot of them are actually, especially in the case of like Chicago and stuff. There's gang violence and
Yeah,
territorial disputes and things like that are behind it.
yeah. So
Um,
that's like the differing factor I think that people are drawing here, is that this is especially heinous because it was plotted out with manifestos, and they're completely innocent, unsuspecting people. Whereas in a lot of these other cases, there might be like a heated argument, or somebody did something really bad to somebody else. And even though murder is pretty harsh,
Yeah.
maybe they like, I don't want to say instigated, but like there are so many factors that go into these one-on-one murders and drive-by shootings, and who knows what else gets lumped in there, like vehicular manslaughter, who knows, like
Yeah.
statistics lie. You can make them say whatever you want them to, really.
That's very true. But I wonder, like, why is there so much call for action legislatively when there's a mass shooting?
Because
It,
people think that's how you fix things, is by
well,
making a law, forgetting
yeah,
the fact
exactly.
that people don't always follow the law.
But then isn't murder illegal to begin with? So shouldn't
Right.
that, I, yeah, and but the thing is, if you think about it, like speaking of Chicago and gang wars and things like that, if people are so concerned about saving lives, why not, you know, if you want to, like, say, ban guns or keep people, put people in facilities if they have mental illness involuntarily, why not do the easy thing if you want to really save a bunch of lives and lift the ban on drugs? That would solve a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of people would be saved. A lot of lives would be saved. People would be out of jail. It's a non-violent, victimless thing, um, and
It has
so
violence injected into it because, yeah, it's
yeah, exactly. Like
underground. And
yeah, the thing is, these people who in the past would be shooting guns at each other, fighting over territory, would suddenly be conducting business and just having better advertising than their competitor, and that would be the end of it. Uh,
yeah, I I can't say that I've ever heard of like dude from Papa John's going over and like drive by shooting a Domino's or something. Like,
no, no, it doesn't happen. No, they just come up with more clever ad campaigns and things like that. Except,
yeah.
yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I'd like to hear people's ideas on not just passing legislation, but at the core level, like societally, like as an individual, as a person in society, what you would do to change these things. Pretend that there is no way to legislate a solution, and the only solution you have is yourself. And I want to hear people's ideas on this. Like, what do we do to solve these problems, like the mass shootings, racism? How do we solve it? Because I definitely don't trust the government to come up with a solution. I think they've failed over and over and over again, and I think it's pretty clear that you, that's not the place to go for an
Yeah.
answer.
And I would challenge people to think really three-dimensionally about it. Like, don't limit yourself to one answer. Try to come up with two or three things that need to happen. You know, try
Yeah,
try to like put yourself in the shoes of the person committing these acts, and try to think like, what would drive me so far to do something like this? Like, role play, like put yourself in that situation and think, what factors would drive me nuts and what could be done to fix that? Because chances are you've probably got more in common than you would like to admit with
mhm,
people that go over the edge.
yeah, and read, if somebody does publish a manifesto, read it, try to figure it out, because I think that is the key. Somebody posts some epic statement right before they commit some atrocious act like that. I think that would go a long way to yielding some understanding. And this is the thing where I'm not going to go conspiratorial, but it is a little suspicious that there's a huge drive to shut down the publication of such things as if it's going to drive more people to do those things. And I think, well, that's bullshit. What it does is yield the actual understanding that we should have about the situation rather than what we're told about the situation by the media. And so you should look it up. The way I found the manifesto for the guy in Texas, like I looked, said El Paso shooter full text manifesto, and that's how you get it. It's out there, but people should read it because
if it's still there, we should link it, I suppose.
Yeah, I got a link to it. The one that popped up, the first result that I found that was actually the full text. Yeah, you judge for yourself, decide for yourself. Don't let somebody tell you how something is. Look at the situation objectively. Use your eyes and your ears and your brain and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a lot of smart people out there. Maybe we can figure out a solution. I mean, if I'd say if one life is saved as a result, that's good. We've done our job.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap things up, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
So keep the conversation going and hang out for the music at the end for sure. And I don't know. Thanks for deep sync diving with us.
Yeah, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Well, you could dislike if you want, and you probably will. That's okay too. But hey, let's all try to get along, and everybody have a good day. Stay safe out there. Revelation, black and sun, cast in shadow.